Everybody thought Kanye West was gonna fail. The college dropout was gonna be Kanye's first and possibly last chance for him to become more than just a producer.
You produce for the #1 artist in the world. What more could you want? I want to be an artist.
Now you might already know the story behind Kanye's fight to create this album. But what you might not know is how Kanye's beat-making expertise and years of production knowledge helped him succeed. So today we're going to deconstruct what these production ideas are, what unique beat-making tips Kanye used on this album, and how the college dropout changed Kanye's career. But before we start, if you could do me a favor and hit like and subscribe if my videos ever helped you out, it would really mean a lot to me. It really helps my channel out. Thank you so much. Now, to truly understand what actually makes this album special, we need to think about how hip-hop sounded in this era that the album came out. Just listen to some of the biggest songs out around this time and let me know if you notice any similarities.
I'm in the having sex, I ain't in the making love, so come give me a hug.
Stop! Oh! Damn, wiggle with it! Yeah! Stop! Oh! You're talking, that make me stir, make me stir. I like the way you do that right there, right there.
I really hoped I wouldn't have to listen to Chingy again in my life, but what you might have noticed is that none of these songs use samples. Back in the 90s, everyone used samples in their beats, but just a few years after, hip-hop had left this style of beat making behind. And it's no surprise why. There are stories and stories of producers and artists getting sued for using samples, making everybody want to move away from this style of beat making. And I think this partly explains why producers like Swiss Beats and Pharrell were so huge around this time. These were guys that didn't use samples in their production. But even in this environment, Kanye stood out. One of the biggest impacts that the college dropout had was how it brought sampling back. And here's where we start to see what makes Kanye so unique. He didn't sample like everyone else did. And the best example of this is on Spaceship. Many producers might just take the sample that was used in this beat and they might just loop a small part of it and add some standard drums on top, and that might be it. But Kanye's approach to sampling was different. This is partly why, even though this beat is amazing, nobody actually wanted it. According to GLC, a friend of Kanye's, he had been shopping this beat to artists along with many others from the college dropout, but everyone rejected them. And when we break this beat down, it actually becomes clear why. Let me show you what I mean. First off, you'll notice that the note placements of many of these chops are not on grid right now. Well, that's because this beat uses a 3/4 timing. If I change the grid to have 3 steps every beat rather than 4, now everything is on grid. So already, this is different than 99.9% of hip-hop beats. And when we look at the kicks in the beat, we can see that there are kicks on every single beat, which is again not common for a hip-hop beat. We also have pockets where kicks stutter at 3/4 timing, again just unusual. When looking at the snares, we also have something irregular happening here as well. When listening to the chops in this sample, this chop here has a snare in it. But the next chop that Kanye uses has a snare at the very beginning of it. And so with how these chops are programmed, we essentially have a snare sitting in spots that they typically never do in a hip-hop beat. Again, just weird. Kanye also layers his own snare into the beat, but we have some weird stuff happening here yet again. There's a snare missing on every single other bar. And again, we have stutters with that 3/4 timing once again. But what might be the strangest part of this beat is the hi-hats. 0 hi-hats in the first half of the loop, and when they do come in, they just have this extremely swung rhythm. Just listen to the odd timing of this. So even though this beat is amazing, I can sort of see why a lot of rappers passed on it. There are just so many strange ideas and rhythms. But even though this beat might be a little bit strange, you'll also notice Kanye does some really smart techniques as well. For example, he hides the seams of his chops really well. Let me show you what I mean. When creating this loop, he could have placed these chops in a very straightforward way, having them play on grid like this. But he decided to do something a bit more advanced, and instead of using this chop right here, he instead created another chop that plays slightly before this one. And he uses this chop earlier on, before the grid line, making it harder to detect when one chop ends and another begins because of its unique placement in the loop. This is a really smart technique. It's one that I talked about in an older video of mine that I made on Kanye and his production ideas spanning his whole career, which should be showing up in the corner if you want to watch that after this one's done. But anyways, back to this beat. Another smart idea we see is Kanye's use of the bass from the very beginning of this sample. And he uses this underneath the main loop. Again, like I mentioned, in an era where everyone's getting sued for samples and having to pay insane money to clear samples, the days of using 7 different samples in one beat were gone. So Kanye was showing some resourcefulness with this sample and how he used it to do more in this beat. There are so many unconventional, unique, and interesting ideas in Spaceship, but this isn't the only time Kanye used his samples in an interesting way on this album. So next up, let's take a look at 2 words.
In the streets, player, get your mail. It's only 2 places you end up either.
This beat shows what would become Kanye's signature, which is layering his own sounds alongside the sample. And this beat really helps us see how he does this. But before we dive into this beat, if you want to be able to make amazing beats like this, I want to let you know about my online beat making program, Better Beatmaker. One member recently told me that after 15 years of making music, he felt like this program is the best musical education tool that he's ever come across. And I've had tons of members tell me they've tried all the other courses, but Better Beatmaker is what they come back to just because it's so much better than the rest. So if you're interested, a link is in the description box below. You can check it out after this video is done. So back to this beat. Here's a mistake that many producers make. They find a sample that already has a lot going on in it, and when they try to add their own sounds on top, they get confused by why it's so hard to do. We'll take a look at how Kanye uses the sample for 2 words, and it becomes more clear how you can do this more successfully. This is the main section of the sample that's used for 2 words here. So you can hear that familiar melody here, but when Kanye made the actual beat, he didn't use this. As you can see, for most of the beat, he only uses these 3 short chops. And 2 of these chops are actually from an earlier section in the sample where it's far less dense. So by not using this huge piece of the sample for the entirety of the beat, this allows him to do a few interesting things. For one, he's able to take that main melody from the sample and recreate it using his own instruments and sounds. This also helps him add his own dense drum pattern as well. And adding this many of his own sounds into this beat is made possible because such a small part of the sample is used. Doing this opens up so much more space to come in and introduce your own ideas into your beat. And with how all these sounds are built, this also helps him create continuity. When Kanye does use that bigger part from the sample during the hook, it fits in seamlessly. Everything that he added already matched what the sample is doing. So by not forcing himself to use these huge chops throughout the entirety of the beat, he's just able to create his own ideas, introduce his own sounds, and make the idea his own. These beats really showcase how Kanye took those core techniques of sampling and pushed new ideas to create an original sound, helping him become the legendary producer that he is. And these are just production ideas that are on College Dropout. So if you want to check out more of Kanye's production techniques over the span of his career, check out the video that's showing up next to me. You'll learn a lot more useful things that you can use in your beats. So go ahead and click it. Come on, click it.